afternoon, and welcome to the third day of the Barclays Global Healthcare Conference. I'm Jeff Meacham. I'm the Senior Biotech Analyst here at Barclays, and we are thrilled to have Myovant Sciences, and speaking on behalf of Myovant is CEO Lynn Seely. Lynn?
Thank you, Jeff. Well, I'm delighted to be here this afternoon to tell you about Myovant Sciences. We are a committed and engaged team focused on bringing innovation to women's health and prostate cancer. I will, of course, be making forward-looking statements during this presentation, so you can see our filings and website for more information. If I can only leave you with one message today, it's very simple. 2019 is without question going to be a historic year for Myovant. Hopefully one that is going to be leading us to bring a new treatment to the marketplace to help the millions of patients we intend to serve. The message is simple. Now is the time to focus on Myovant Sciences because it is truly a unique investment opportunity. And let me tell you why I say this. In the next 4 quarters, we're going to be unblinding data from 5 phase 3 clinical trials across 3 different indications: uterine fibroids, endometriosis, and prostate cancer. And when you consider the probability of success of these clinical trials, it's important to know that relugolix has a clinically validated mechanism of action. And these trials are based upon multiple phase 2 and even phase 3 clinical trials. In fact, Takeda recently received approval for relugolix in Japan. The clinical safety database contains more than 2,100 study participants. This is, without question, a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and I'm going to tell you about that. Our women's health product candidate is specifically designed to be differentiated from the competition, and I'm going to talk to you about that. Prostate cancer, we have the only oral GnRH receptor antagonist in development for prostate cancer. And importantly, we have wholly owned U.S. and European rights across these indications. For those of you who are newer to the story, Myovant is an independent company with independent leadership, but we're also a part of the greater Roivant ecosystem, a family of companies that now includes 15 Vants and growing. This gives us a some unique advantages such as access to capital and knowledge sharing. Well, let's look at the Myovant late-stage pipeline lineup. We are developing 2 distinct products, relugolix in combination for our women's health indications and relugolix monotherapy for men with prostate cancer. In our women's health indications, we have 2 phase 3 clinical trials ongoing for women with heavy menstrual bleeding associated with uterine fibroids, Liberty 1 and Liberty 2. And we'll be bringing top-line results for Liberty 1 in Q2 and for Liberty 2 in Q3 with an anticipated filing and NDA filing in Q4 of this year. We're also continuing to enroll 2 phase 3 clinical trials in women with endometriosis and expect to bring top-line results from those trials in the first quarter of 2020. In our second product candidate, the men's health product candidate, relugolix monotherapy for advanced prostate cancer, we have the HERO study, which has completed enrollment, and we'll be presenting top-line results from that study in Q4 of this year. And if that's not enough, we also have a second product, MVT-602, which is the only kisspeptin agonist in development, and we're developing that for women with infertility. We've completed a phase 2A study, which we plan to present data from in the first half of this year. So truly, this is going to be a historic year for Myovant. I often get asked, well, how can one drug treat both women's health problems like endometriosis and uterine fibroids, as well as to treat men with prostate cancer? And the reason is because sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone are controlled centrally at the brain, at the level of the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So GnRH, or gonadotropin-releasing hormone, goes from the hypothalamus to the pituitary. There it causes the release of 2 hormones, luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. And those 2 hormones are the same in men and in women. In women, they cause the ovaries to make estrogen, and in the men, they cause the testes to make testosterone. Why is that important? because estrogen drives uterine fibroids and endometriosis in women, and testosterone drives prostate cancer in men. So very simply, by inhibiting this pathway with relugolix, we can bring treatment for 3 very important diseases. Well, let's focus first on our women's health indications. Myovant is developing relugolix in combination for 2 very important and serious and debilitating diseases. And a lot of people don't really appreciate how serious and debilitating these diseases are. Uterine fibroids is incredibly common. This is a disease where benign tumors grow in the uterus. And depending on which series you read, they can be in anywhere from 25 to 80% of premenopausal women, consistently with the highest prevalence in the African American population. These benign tumors, they can be multiple, they can grow quite large. In about 25% of these women, they really impact quality of life. Why? Because they cause heavy menstrual bleeding. Bleeding so heavy and of such long duration that women can become anemic. They get tired, they get fatigued because of their anemia. Bleeding so heavy that women can't go to work. They have to leave work oftentimes. They can't do their normal activities for fear of social embarrassment. These tumors can become large and can cause bulk symptoms. They can cause significant pain, urinary frequency, constipation. And you can imagine if tumors are growing in the uterus, they can cause fetal complications or pregnancy-related complications. And people say, well, why are these symptoms so bothersome? And largely because they're impacting women's quality of life, her relationships. But they are so bad that there are 250,000 hysterectomies performed in the United States each year, and even more in Europe. And this is a major operation that can have substantial complications. And then there's endometriosis. 1 in 10 women, 10% of premenopausal women have endometriosis. And yet very few people talk about it. It's a mysterious disease. It causes chronic pelvic pain in about 75% of the women who have it. Pain which can be incredibly severe during periods, during their menses, but it can occur at any time in the month. And it's an inflammatory disease, so it gets worse over time, can cause adhesions, scar tissue, tissues stick together. Intercourse can become very painful for these women. Oftentimes they don't know what's wrong because it can take up to 10 years to be diagnosed. And so these women, they're suffering from this pain. Again, they drop out of their activities, they miss school, they have trouble with productivity at work. They become isolated because they don't really know what's wrong with them. And depression is a major issue with these women. And then, of course, finally, there's this fear of infertility, because once they are diagnosed, they learn that 50% of women evaluated in infertility clinics have endometriosis. This pain can be so severe that a number of these women end up on opioids, undergoing repeated operations trying to treat this inflammatory disorder, oftentimes unsuccessfully, and 100,000 hysterectomies are performed each year for endometriosis. So clearly there's a real need for new treatments to treat these diseases. And I have to tell you, these diseases are so common that each person in this room knows someone with endometriosis or uterine fibroids. And if you don't, it's probably because you're missing something important in the lives of the women you care about. When I say millions of women are suffering, I'm not kidding. And here are the numbers. You can see the prevalence numbers: 19 million women with uterine fibroids, 8 million with endometriosis. And of those, 11 million in total are symptomatic. The frontline treatments are typically nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories and oral contraceptives, but still 4 million women, we estimate, fail those frontline treatments and are in need of an additional treatment. So no matter how you look at it, this is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity and a significant opportunity to help women. And I oftentimes think, I'm a woman, I'm an endocrinologist. I had no idea just how common these diseases were or how debilitating. And you have to say, why is that? If so many millions of women are suffering, why aren't we talking about it? And the reason is because women historically traditionally have been taught to suffer in silence. These diseases are embarrassing. They're associated with shame and stigma. And quite frankly, women just don't talk about it. They don't talk about it to one another. But that's changing, and I think more and more women are ready to sort of stand up. You see more and more articles and information about periods and periods diseases. And in fact, we're partnering quite aggressively to get this information out and to help educate women about their periods, what's normal, what's abnormal. We've partnered with Period, which is the largest nonprofit youth-led organization with more than 200 chapters at college campuses around the country, leading the menstrual movement and conversations about periods. We're partnered with Flow, which is an artificially intelligence-powered period tracker with 28 million users who are actively engaged tracking their periods. And this is an opportunity for us to develop a new tool to help them track their bleeding, so women can start to understand when their bleeding is not normal and maybe they need to seek a new treatment. Well, if these diseases are so common, why aren't there treatments? And the reason is it's been a little bit difficult. We know uterine fibroids and endometriosis are driven by estrogen. That's well established, and that if you lower estrogen, you can reduce the symptoms. But the problem is if estrogen goes too low, women have side effects. They can cause bone mineral density loss and osteoporosis ultimately, vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes, and vaginal dryness. And so you have to find a treatment approach which benefits the symptoms but doesn't cause new side effects. And I'm going to tell you about Myovance's approach, and really our objective is to develop a long-term treatment so that women can have an option to the current surgical and invasive procedures that they're undergoing. A treatment that optimizes estrogen levels into the right range. When we talk about estrogen levels, and we're going to talk about estradiol, which is the major circulating form of estrogen, there's sort of multiple approaches. But the one thing that everybody agrees upon, and you see this on the arrows on the left-hand side, is that the higher estrogen levels are, the less benefit, the more the uterine fibroids and endometriosis are stimulated. If you lower estrogen, you get good benefit, but if you go too low, you get bone loss. So that's that red arrow. There is this narrow green band of these, the optimal level where you get that optimal benefit risk. And that's what people are trying to achieve. But there's some difficulty in doing that because if you look at the blue bar, those are untreated women. That's the range of estradiol levels in a population of untreated women. Due to where they are in their menstrual cycle, estradiol levels vary quite tremendously, also because of genetics. We know that if you give a drug like a GnRH agonist, Lupron, you can beautifully suppress estrogen levels. You see that full suppression in yellow. But that beautifully treats the symptoms, but it causes other problems. Women don't feel well when their estrogen is that low. They get the bone mineral density loss and the vaginal dryness. Some companies are trying partial suppression with monotherapy, where maybe you try a dose of drug that will lower estrogen just enough to benefit symptoms, but not so much as to cause side effects. But it turns out that's actually very hard to do. Maybe if you have a low dose, you benefit some women, but too many women remain with estrogen levels too high and don't get the benefit. If you go to a higher dose, more women might respond, but then you'll get a group of women who have too much bone mineral density loss, which will limit the duration of use of that treatment. And we wanted to remember, again, a long-term treatment that women can use safely for some period of time. And so we've come up with this concept of combination therapy, where we give relugolix 40 milligrams, which is very effective at suppressing estrogen, but we give it in combination with 1 milligram of estradiol, which sets a floor. So women can't go too low. The goal is so that it prevents bone mineral density loss and hot flashes and really gets women into that optimized range predictably and reliably the first time. And so this is our overall product profile. What we're aiming to do is provide women with a safe, long-term treatment. Relugolix 40 milligrams with estradiol and a progestin. This is very low-dose estrogen, similar to a very low-dose contraceptive. And with that, we get this well-tolerated combination to optimize estradiol and levels. And we expect that that will bring us with one pill once a day, predictable efficacy. And it's important we're bringing relugolix and the estradiol and progestin together into one pill so women can take one pill once a day to help benefit their symptoms. We believe this formulation will minimize spotting and breakthrough bleeding and while maintaining bone health. And also will prevent pregnancy, we believe, because you'll get ovarian suppression, suppression of ovulation with relugolix 40 milligrams. Well, let's look at some of the data behind this. This is data from a phase 2 trial that was conducted in women with uterine fibroids and heavy menstrual bleeding. What's really important about this study is to know that you had to come into the trial with heavy menstrual bleeding. To be a responder, you had to have a 90% decrease in the blood loss assessment score. So a very substantial hurdle, and it was so high that in the placebo arm, no placebo patients responded. But you can see this very nice dose response with almost 84% of women responding at Relugolix 40 milligrams, which is the dose we're taking forward in our phase 3 program. Highly statistically significant, and we saw a nice shrinkage of the fibroids. But this, again, is 84% of women responding with a 90% reduction in their blood loss assessment. I would say that Takeda took these phase 2 data and actually designed a phase 3 program with the same endpoint and actually replicated these results, showing very similar results to Lupron. And they used those data to recently, in January, get approval for Relugolix in Japan to treat women with uterine fibroids. And as part of that package, not only did they show a benefit in heavy menstrual bleeding, but also in pain. And so in this phase 3 trial, they took women with pain associated with uterine fibroids. They had to have a maximum pain score of at least 4 on the numerical rating scale, which is a 10-point scale. The average was about 6. And to be a responder, you had to drop to 1 or less, essentially minimal or no pain. And you can see that's a very high bar, and it's only 3% of women on placebo responded, which is a very low placebo response rate. But almost 60% of women on Relugolix responded. And this is so important because pain and heavy menstrual bleeding are the 2 most common symptoms associated with uterine fibroids. This is our phase 3 clinical trial design in uterine fibroids. We're running 2 replica trials, Liberty 1 and Liberty 2. About 400 women enrolled in each trial. You see the Relugolix combination therapy versus placebo as the primary comparison at week 24. We also have a middle arm where women will get Relugolix monotherapy for 12 weeks, followed by the combination. And this is to label the combination therapy. We need to show the benefit of the estradiol and progestin in the phase 3 trial. And then we'll continue on for 1-year data, and we've actually recently extended that trial, so we'll be continuing on for 2 years. And what's really important to note here is the primary endpoint is a 50% reduction. And remember, I talked to you before in phase 2, I showed you a 90% reduction, so actually a somewhat lower bar. And before I leave that, I'll tell you, data coming in Q2 2019, just around the corner, and then also for Liberty 2 in Q3. And several things have been happening in the uterine fibroids landscape, which are important to note, that have really de-risked our program to some degree. First of all, of course, Takeda receiving approval in Japan with their phase 3 program in women with uterine fibroids. Second of all, we had 2 competitors that have, in a different class of drugs, selective progesterone receptor modulators, which have dropped out over the last year for safety problems. Esmia was Allergan's product that got a complete response letter due to liver toxicity. And then AbbVie has reported positive phase 3 results with their program in uterine fibroids with Elagolix, with a 3-pill-a-day program, 300 milligrams twice a day, with in combination with estradiol and progestin, very similarly to what we're doing in 1 pill once a day. And they were able to show with that combination preservation of bone mineral density, which again further de-risks our clinical program. Their response rates were 68% and 76%. And given the data I've just shown you with our 80% response rates with a 90% decrease, we feel very confident that we're in a position to compete effectively with Elagolix. What about endometriosis? Again, we have a nice phase 2 data with a similar dose response curve. You can see in this particular trial, women with endometriosis and pelvic pain were enrolled. You can see, again, a nice dose response with the same dose as we showed you previously with Relugolix 40 milligrams in the high dose in the orange bar, working very comparably to Lupron or Luprolide, which we know beautifully suppresses estradiol levels. So with 1 pill once a day, we can suppress estradiol levels comparably to these depot injections of Lupron. But what's important is if ever a woman wants to stop our treatment, hormone levels return in 1 cycle. So she can stop the drug get her menstrual cycle back in one period and resume fertility if that's her choice. The phase 3 trials that are ongoing in endometriosis look quite similar to what I just showed you for uterine fibroids. These trials are larger because they're pain studies, about 600 women being enrolled in each trial, the same 3 arms. And here we have co-primary endpoints. We'll be looking for a benefit on pain during periods or dysmenorrhea, as well as non-menstrual pelvic pain. Same 6-month primary endpoint with continuation of this trial for 1 year, and we just extended through to 2 years. These data will be coming in Q1 2020. Well, let me begin and take just a few minutes to tell you about our prostate cancer program. This is near and dear to my heart. I love prostate cancer. I had the good fortune of developing Xtandi while I was Chief Medical Officer at Medivation, and thrilled to be back in the field of prostate cancer with relugolix. And again, this is the only oral GnRH receptor antagonist in development for prostate cancer, likely because it's potent, it's highly potent, and also its long duration, its long half-life and duration. I think everybody knows that prostate cancer is an enormously prevalent cancer in men. Testosterone drives prostate cancer, and the GnRH drugs which lower prostate cancer, such as Lupron, it's about $1 billion market globally. So this is a large indication. And when you look at the prostate cancer landscape, it's important to know that androgen deprivation therapy with GnRH drugs really is a foundational therapy. It started after men recur after their initial local therapy. So if their PSA or prostate-specific antigen starts to rise again after their prostatectomy, for example, or if they present with metastatic disease, their testosterone has to be lowered to castrate levels. And the GnRH drugs are used to do that. Once they're started, they're typically continued throughout the course of the disease. As the disease progresses from castration-sensitive disease to castration-resistant disease, the many more expensive drugs are added, but they're added on top of, in addition to the GnRH drugs. So very long duration, the foundational therapy. And it's important to note that really it's that castration-resistant disease, which is the most lethal form of the disease, where a lot of the morbidity and mortality starts to happen, particularly the metastatic bone disease. And so what are we bringing to the marketplace with relugolix? This is a precision oral medicine. It rapidly drops testosterone and PSA. It's a direct antagonist. It's not like Lupron, the agonist, which first rises testosterone and PSA, and then gradually over weeks will it come down. This rapidly within days will lower testosterone, brings about much more rapid control of PSA, and importantly, if you stop it for any reason, testosterone will come back much more rapidly. You may say, well, why would you want to do that? And it turns out that because men have to stay on these androgen deprivation therapies for such long periods of time, more and more often they're being given drug holidays or intermittent therapy to give them an opportunity to get their testosterone back so they can feel better. If their PSA gets beautifully suppressed for a period of months, let's say 9 or 12 months, then they can take a holiday and come off. And this is the perfect drug to allow for that. In addition, we've recently added a new endpoint to our HERO study, which is to look at the time to castration resistance, that lethal form of the disease. And we believe we have an opportunity to show superiority over Lupron in that endpoint, because the GnRH antagonists, like our drug, beautifully suppress both luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. And we believe that's going to allow us to prolong the time to castration resistance. That's been shown by another GnRH receptor antagonist, degarelix, which is a depot injection, a high-volume injection that has to be given every month. It's approved for use. It works. It's just not a very attractive product for men because of an up to 40% injection site reaction rate. And so we believe if we can show this superiority data, it's going to be really, our market research shows it's going to be tremendously important to men and the physicians who treat them. So here's the phase 3 trial. We've enrolled 934 men in this trial. It's randomized 2-to-1 to relugolix or Lupron. And notice that dose of 120 milligrams, 3 times the women's health dose. And this, again, significantly de-risks the safety profile of the women's health program. These men stay on the drug for 1 year, and we're looking for testosterone suppression, to castrate levels through 48 weeks. This is quite an easy oncology trial. We don't have to show progression-free survival. We don't have to show overall survival. We simply need to show testosterone suppression to castrate levels. Data from this trial will be coming out this year in Q4. And just in my last 2 minutes, let me tell you about our kisspeptin agonist. Again, the only kisspeptin agonist in clinical development. This is kisspeptin pathway is a novel pathway. The kisspeptin peptides are up in the hypothalamus. And interestingly, this is a pathway that controls the onset of puberty in boys and in girls. And it's actually responsible for the monthly ovulation that occurs in women each month. And so we're trying to harness that very simple action of ovulation each month, which comes with a surge of luteinizing hormone. And we're doing that in women who have infertility and are undergoing in vitro fertilization. They get a lot of hormonal preparation to stimulate eggs to mature, and then they get a trigger to stimulate ovulation so that the eggs can be collected and fertilized. And what we're trying to do is come up with a physiologic or a normal treatment for that that doesn't result in ovarian hyperstimulation, which is one of the key side effects of the currently available hormones and something that results in a lot of cycles being aborted. And so our product profile here is to increase luteinizing hormone with our kisspeptin agonist, which we've been able to show already in phase 1, to get a physiologic stimulation so that it much more mimics the normal profile that we see so that it doesn't cause ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and then ideally, ultimately, equivalent fertility rates with a good safety profile. So we've just completed a phase 2A study that we'll be presenting at this first half of this year. So with that, let me stop, and thanks for your attention, and I hope I've convinced all of you that Myovant Sciences is a very unique investment opportunity. Thank you.